in speaking to Judge Stultz, he had a bit of a concern with the canon of ethics about his testimony, and that his aware is that he's not allowed to testify solely as a character witness for someone, which is not what his intention here would be. But I did tell him that I would inform the court that he is here under subpoena. He is voluntarily waiving his right to testify, but he is here under a state subpoena.
Right. I think that's. I mentioned that, and that was probably a misstatement. That I was saying that he was here voluntarily. If he is subpoenaed, then he's here pursuant to a subpoena and a court order. Thank you for clarifying that.
The only other thing is that I have not technically introduced State's Exhibit number 15. It has been marked, identified, and testified about, but has not been introduced. I would so move. I can do that in front of the jury if you want me to do that in front of the jury, if you are inclined to accept the motion now, that's satisfactory to the state.
To which exhibit?
15.
Phone records.
Oh, no, I was waiting for that, Your Honor. I want to be heard whenever that's considered. I thought it was going to be done through the witness, but it wasn't. But I would want further argument on that point. I don't.
All right. Do you need it introduced prior to this witness testimony or prior to another break?
I do not.
All right. Well, we'll take it up.
Thank you.
I'm not opposed to taking up the motion to introduce at a later time with the witness off the stand, but I don't want to take more time and hear the arguments right now. We'll do it at a later time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Very good. Let's then bring jurors back in. Ms. Latour, further evidence from the state?
Your Honor, the state would call Judge John Stultz.
Your Honor, if you would please place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right. Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you give before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Latour?
Thank you, Your Honor. Judge, will you introduce yourself to the jury?
I'm Judge Jay Stultz. My name is John Hoyt Stultz III, but I go by Jay Stultz.
And you say you're a judge. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm a district court judge in the 9A district in Person and Caswell counties.
All right. And how long have you been a district court judge?
I was elected in November of 2016 and was sworn in January 1, 2017.
And before you were a district court judge, what did you do for a living?
I was an assistant district attorney for 6 years in the district attorney's office in 9A, Caswell and Person County.
And before that, what'd you do?
I was in private practice from 2003 to approximately until I went into the DA's office. And then prior to that, I was private practice in Rockingham County from 1996 to 2003.
When you started in the DA's office in Person, Caswell County, that's District 9A,
Yes.
Who was the elected district attorney that hired you?
Wallace Bradsher.
And when you came into the district attorney's office there, where were you mainly stationed initially?
Person County.
At some point, did that switch?
Yes.
When did that switch?
It happened in, I believe, January of 2015.
Okay. And that would have been the second term of Mr. Bradsher?
Yes.
When you got to, when I say you switched, does that mean you went to Caswell County?
Yes.
When you were in Caswell County, what were your job duties there as the assistant DA?
I oversaw general operations, dealt with Superior Court from District Court to Superior Court transition, prosecution of cases in District Court and Superior Court, and other administrative matters.
While you were working for the defendant, were you aware of his wife, Pam Bradsher?
Yes.
And were you aware that she worked for Wallace Bradsher?
Yes.
And at some point, did you become aware that if there was an issue with that employment?
I think there was a question initially whether it was something that would be allowed, that was in 2011. But subsequent to that, I learned that there was an issue with Pam working in the office, and that would have been, I believe, sometime in early 2015.
All right. And in 2015, when you find out that there might be an issue, what's your understanding of the events surrounding that, if you have any?
Mr. Bradsher informed me that there was a problem with the State Ethics Commission and that Pam could no longer work for his office.
All right, and when he informed you of that, were you made aware of any accommodations that they attempted to make to fix that problem?
At some point after that initial conversation, I learned that Cindy Blitzer would be working for the Person Caswell District Attorney's Office, and that Pam Bradsher would be working for the Rockingham County District Attorney's Office.
How did you were you a part of that decision-making process?
No,
How did you become aware of that?
Mr. Bradsher told me.
And when Mr. Bradsher told you that that Pam was going to go to Rockingham and that Cindy was going to come to Person Caswell, was there any discussion at that point about any role that you may have in that?
I would be working with Cindy in the very beginning. She would be working in district court, and I would be working with her there.
Okay, and what county would that be in?
That would be in Caswell.
And did that occur?
She came to work a number of times in district court. We have district court on Wednesdays there. She came a number of Wednesdays. She came before to get an ID badge, and I went around the courthouse with her and introduced her to the clerks and that sort of thing.
And during the course of that employment, were you ever made aware if at some point she was no longer going to work in the Person Caswell office physically?
Yes.
How were you made aware of that?
Mr. Bradsher informed me that she was going to be working on conflict cases and special projects or other items.
Okay. You say the word special projects. What do you mean by that?
I don't know. I was told that there would be special projects.
Okay. Did you ever give her any special projects?
No, she was working on a case that I assigned to her, which was a homicide case, Shockley, and I assigned her that.
Okay. Other than the Shockley case, which would that have been a conflict case?
It would have been a conflict case.
Okay. Other than conflict cases, were there any other special projects that you assigned to Cindy Blitzer?
No.
Are you aware of any other special projects that were ever assigned to Cindy Blitzer?
Other than that, I heard at some point in time there were some. I wasn't aware of what they were.
Who did you hear that from?
Mr. Bradsher.
Do you know when you would have heard that?
I don't.
Were you her supervisor at that period of time?
Ms. Blitzer,
Yes.
I don't recall whether I was or not.
Okay. Did you ever discuss with Cindy Blitzer any special projects?
No, I talked with her about Shockley. I did make inquiries with her on a number of occasions about some routine matters, but no special projects or any sort of thing like that.
Did you ever talk to Wallace Bradsher about any of those special projects that he apparently assigned to Cindy Blitzer?
No.
Did he ever tell you anything along the lines of, hey, I need Cindy to work on this for me?
In August of 2015, I informed Mr. Bradsher that I was not going to be able to try the Shockley case. I had been informed that they wanted to put it on the trial calendar in October of 2015. And I told Mr. Defense Counsel, Dick Panish, in Rockingham County, who was participating in that case, had indicated they wanted to put it on the trial calendar in October of 2015, and I did not feel comfortable with that with the other matters that I had.
Okay. Well,
And
we'll get to that in just
right.
a second. I want to ask you a little bit about Cindy and her initial job description. When you said that you find out she's moving to Rockingham County to work, right?
Yes,
Where is your home base?
Caswell County.
All right. And is there a discussion between you and Wallace Bradsher about whether or not you're going to supervise her?
There was, because of the proximity of Caswell County and Rockingham County being adjoining counties,
All right.
we had a conversation that I would be supervising her on those conflict matters.
Okay. would you also be tasked with releasing her beacon time?
That was assigned to me by Mr. Bradsher at some point in time, but I don't remember the exact date that that was done.
Okay. At the time that you're releasing her beacon hours, who's releasing, if you're aware, everyone else in the office's beacon hours?
I believe that would be Gail Peed.
Did you give Cindy Blitzer tasks to work on through the summer of 2015?
I did in the beginning of the summer. I indicated to Cindy that she needed to prepare the Shockley case. It was in disarray, and I wanted it prepared for trial, chronologically organized, and that sort of thing, and
Okay.
summarized in some places.
Okay. And did you estimate that would take a great deal of time?
I anticipated it would take a long time. There were DSS records that were involved in that file, and I was concerned about prior testimony in the DSS proceedings that went along with the homicide. So it would have taken, I anticipated, at least a month.
Okay. Did you give her any other tasks to work on during the time she's working on the Shockley case, other than maybe a minor task here or there that would not take a great period of time?
No.
Do you know if anyone else did?
I had been told by Mr. Bradsher he had things that she was going to do, but I don't know what those were.
Okay. Did he ever tell you that he gave her those things to do?
Other than saying, I'll be responsible for her hours in supervising, other than that, no, Mr. Latour.
When was that conversation?
August of 2015.
Okay. Well, before we get to August, I want to talk about this initial time frame.
Yes.
While you've given her the Shockley case to work on, and you maybe some other minor things you said, correct? Is she working in the Rockingham County office, or is she working anywhere else?
She was working in the Rockingham County office as a location. My understanding from Mr. Bradsher was that she would be authorized to work in Rockingham County and from home.
And from home?
Yes.
Okay. And did you give her that authorization, or did the defendant give her that authorization?
Mr. Bradsher did.
Do you know why?
No.
Now, we talked a little bit about the Shockley case. Were there any other conflict cases that you're aware of that she worked on for you?
She may have had some involvement in preparation or some conversation about scheduling of some matters, but nothing significant.
All right. Now, the Shockley file, you say in August of 2015 you hear from defense attorneys that they want to set the case on the trial calendar. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And when you find this out, what do you do?
I went and talked to Mr. Bradsher. I didn't feel comfortable about trying that case in that time frame.
Okay. And when you spoke to Mr. Bradsher, what did you tell him?
I told him that I didn't feel comfortable about handling the case,
And,
that I was requesting that he be responsible for it or assign it to someone.
okay. And when you told him that, what information did you receive back?
He indicated to me that he would take the case and he would try the case. And he indicated that he would continue to, or he would take over any responsibility for supervision of Cindy and her duties as it related to the Shockey case and otherwise.
Okay. Did he say anything else to you at that period of time about, in August of 2015, about Cindy Blitzer and your involvement with her?
He said that he would take that over and she was no longer in my chain of command.
Okay. Once this conversation in August of 2015 happens between you and Wallace Bradsher about Cindy Blitzer, do you ever assign her any other tasks?
No.
Do you ever deal with her in any way other than maybe Beacon?
No.
Now, you testified earlier that you were at some point assigned to approve her Beacon time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Would that have been early on in this?
It would have been after February, and if I had to say, I would say probably March or April
Of
of 2015.
Okay. Now, are you a Beacon employee?
I utilize Beacon for health insurance and that sort of thing, but I'm not entering hours in Beacon. No,
As an assistant DA, you were not required to do that.
no.
Were you supervising at that point or releasing the time for anyone else as it relates to Beacon in the Person-Caswell County office?
No.
Had you ever approved anyone else's time in Beacon that you can recall?
I released Gail Peed's Beacon when I was the Person County Chief. Ms. Peed released all of the Beacon for all of our employees other than herself, and she could not release herself, and I was given that job as Person County Chief Assistant DA.
Okay. Were you good about going in and releasing Beacon hours?
No.
Why not?
I would forget. It was not a weekly thing that I had to do. I had no reason to be in Beacon other than to do that, and I would forget from time to time and would require reminders. Ms. Peed would remind me that there were hours there that needed to be released.
Would Ms. Blitzer remind you?
Yes.
How would they do that?
Ms. Peed would send me an email. At that time, I was next door to Ms. Peed, so she would stick her head out the door and say, "Release my Beacon." Ms. Blitzer would send me an email and I have Beacon hours there to be released.
Now, at some point, do your duties as far as Cindy Blitzer's Beacon hours ever change?
Yes, in March of 2016, I had neglected to release those hours for a period of time, and I remembered it. I looked at the hours. I had had a conversation with Mr. Bradsher at some point in time about the status of the Shockley case, and I released those hours. I told Mr. Bradsher that with everything that I was doing administratively, some of my involvement with DWI court and some other things, I had a lot of things that were on me in addition to running for district court judge. And I requested that since Shockley had not yet been disposed, I was asking that whoever was responsible for Shockley deal with that.
And that was in March of 2016?
Yes.
Did you go in at that point and approve a big chunk of time for Cindy Blitzer?
I believe so.
Why did you do that?
I had neglected to do it, and I discovered it, and I approved it based on what I had been told previously. And then I had a conversation with Mr. Bradsher because I didn't think about it very often, and I was bad about doing it.
At that point, are you aware of any, whether she was doing the work that she was supposed to be doing or not?
No.
And in the past, had you seen her doing work?
In the past, I did. In the early summer of 2015, I observed in the Rockingham County District Attorney's Office the Shockley file being highlighted, tabbed. It was spread out all over a desk, and I had talked with her about it.
Do you continue to stay in Caswell County District Attorney's Office as the chief ADA for that entire period of time?
I did until April or May of 2016, where Mr. Bradsher came to Caswell County to assume that role.
And can you tell us how that came about?
There was a lot of contention that centered around the judge's race about our week-long DWI sessions where we attempted to dispose of 80 or 90 DWI cases in a week. And things were contentious between the district attorney's office and the Caswell County Bar, and Mr. Bradsher assumed that role.
So in April or May of 2016, where do you go?
I began to rotate opposite of Judge Gentry, who was my opponent in district court. I could not appear in front of him under the election rules, and as a result of that, people were having to appear in front of him where I normally would. So I rotated between opposite of him with Judge Galloway in different court sessions that were required, in person and Caswell.
Okay. But During that period of time, do you know where Mr. Bradsher was focusing his practice?
He was primarily in Caswell County, but he continued to maintain a presence in Person County because I observed him there. He was in both places.
And this is April and May of 2016?
Yes.
Now, when you approved that big chunk of time, you say you did that in March of 2016?
I believe so.
Would that have been January, February time, or would that have been some other period of time that you released?
I don't recall, Mr. Latour. I believe it would probably be January and February.
Okay. And is that a period of time in which you were responsible for the beacon hours?
Yes.
Okay. After that chunk of time that you released, do you routinely go in and look at her time or approve any more time for Cindy Blitzer?
No.
Why not?
I don't go to Beacon. I may have gone to Beacon once to look at a W-2 form or to review something for health insurance reasons, but I go to once a year maybe.
Okay. You testified earlier that you had a conversation with Wallace Bradsher around that period of time about supervision of Cindy Blitzer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you recall when you tell him you've got all these things going on, what his reaction to you was?
He said he would take care of it and it would be assigned to someone else.
Okay. Are you aware if he assigned that to anyone else?
I assumed that it had been done. I found out later that it was not.
Okay. During that period of time, is Wallace Bradsher operating as the de facto chief of Caswell County?
He is.
And did that happen when did that end, if it did end, if you're aware?
I don't know. It would have ended sometime around the election, I would assume.
Which would have been when?
November of 2016.
Is that because that's when this conflict would have ended for you?
I believe so, and I was also required after the election, there was a week or so, then we were in Thanksgiving holiday, and the first week of December I had new judge orientation at the School of Government for a week. And I had some preparation that I had to do in terms of a video series that I had to watch and some other things that I had to do to prepare for the swearing in January.
Now, again, during this period of time, are you aware of any special projects that Cindy Blitzer was working on?
No.
During this period of time, did Wallace Bradsher ever reach out to you and ask you about Cindy Blitzer?
No.
What she was working on?
No.
Did you ever reach out to him and have any conversation with him about it?
I did in passing on a time or two. I asked if the Shockley case was going to be pled or if it was going to be tried and what the status of it was.
Are you aware if at some point the Shockley case was pled or resolved?
I believe that happened after I'd already been sworn in as a judge. I know that it was pled, but I don't remember when I was made aware of it, and I don't remember when it pled.
Okay. Are you aware if at some point in time the Shockley file was taken away from Cindy Blitzer?
I believe that someone told me that, but I don't remember who told me that.
Do you know around when that would have been?
I don't.
In August, or on August the 15th of 2016, did you have any contact with the defendant?
I did.
And what prompted you to have contact with the defendant on or about August the 15th of 2016?
He called me and asked me to come to the district attorney's office that evening.
Where did he call you?
Called me on my cell phone.
Where were you?
I was at Roxborough Community School at a volleyball game.
Is this during or after work hours?
It was after work hours.
And when he asked you to come to the office, does he tell you anything about what it's about?
No, he just said it was a matter he wanted to talk to me about.
Okay. When you received that information, what'd you do?
I was at the ball game with my family. I got the keys from my wife and drove to the DA's office, which it's, as a crow flies, is probably 300 yards, but drove to the DA's, the DA's office.
Okay. When you got to the DA's office, what'd you do?
I went into the DA's office and found Mr. Bradsher in the conference room and asked him what was going on.
Did he tell you what was going on?
He indicated to me that he had gotten a phone call from an SBI agent and that there was a problem with Cindy's hours.
Okay, and when he told you that, what was your reaction?
I was curious what the problem was.
Okay. Did you have any suspicion in your mind about what the problem could be?
After I thought about it for a minute, I asked Mr. Bradsher if who was releasing her time, her beacon hours.
Okay. And why'd you ask him that?
Well, I was concerned if I had a hard time remembering to do it, maybe someone else had not remembered to do it as well.
Okay. Did you know who at that time was supposed to be releasing the hours?
No, I did not.
Did you know if it was supposed to be you?
I didn't believe it was supposed to be me. I'd had a conversation with him the prior March about doing that I wasn't doing it anymore.
And during that conversation, had he affirmatively told you that someone else would take care of it?
Yes.
And when you posed this question to him, what's his response?
You are.
And when he said that to you, what'd you do? What did you think?
I said, no, I'm not. Remember the conversation that we had back at the first part of the year where that was going to be assigned to somebody else.
And when you said that to him, what was the next thing that happened?
I don't remember what was said, but the gist of it was, well, that may be the problem because that was my understanding is that was the problem, that no one was approving or releasing the beacon hours.
When you say that might be the problem, what are you referring to?
I was thinking it was an administrative issue, something that was triggered like at the end of the fiscal year, at the end of June, or some sort of inquiry. Mr. Bradsher told me during that period of time that the SBI was trying to clear up a matter, and that's what I thought it was. I thought it was an administrative issue.
Okay. And when he tells you about the SBI looking into the matter or trying to clear up the matter, what's your reaction?
I thought perhaps that when I had not approved or released any of that beacon time, that may have triggered the inquiry that was being made.
Okay. Do you know now whether that was the case?
I know now that it was a criminal investigation.
Okay. Had you spoken to the SBI at that point?
No. I wasn't even aware of the issue before that night.
Okay. Based on your conversation with Mr. Bradsher, do you know if he was aware of the issue?
I don't know.
At least that the SBI was looking into the matter.
He told me the SBI was looking into the matter. That was the first thing that he told me.
Okay. And based on this conversation about what you thought might be the issue, what happened next?
I told him that I could release that beacon time if he requested me to do that.
Okay. And when you said that, did you call anybody or talk to anybody else while you were there?
When Mr. Bradsher said, you're releasing or you're dealing with Cindy's hours, and I said, no, I'm not, remember that conversation. I called Gail Peed on her cell phone, I believe, and indicated to her that, ask her who was releasing Cindy's beacon time.
And based on that conversation, what information did you receive?
She told me that I was doing it as far as she knew, that no one else was doing it besides me.
Okay. And after that phone call, you have this conversation about your ability to go in and approve the time. Is that right?
Yes.
And what specifically, if you recall, did you say to Wallace Bradsher about that?
I told him that I could release the time. He says, you can do that from here. I said, yes, I can. He said, do it. I said, okay. I stepped out of the conference room through the open door that led into my old office and walked in and sat down at the computer. I logged in with my login credentials, logged into Beacon, and I asked Wallace, I said, is everything the same that has been before with the Mr. Henderson working in Rockingham and Cindy working for us? And I said, is all that the same? And he said, yes. I said, she's worked these hours that she's been working this whole time. And he said, yes, she has.
Okay. Now, if you're in another room, how are you having this conversation with him?
The distance is probably less than the distance from me to you, and there was an open door. He was just on the other side of a connecting doorway slightly out of my line of sight, but less than the distance from me to you.
And when you asked him, is she working these hours, what was his response?
He said yes.
Affirmatively, yes?
Yes, he said yes, she's worked. He said yes in response to my question, has she been working these hours?
Okay. And when he told you that, what'd you do?
I released that beacon to AOC.
Now, would that have been a big chunk of beacon time?
It would have been from the March timeframe where I did the last release and I had the conversation with him up until that August timeframe.
August the 15th.
I don't remember if it included that full week or not.
Okay, but up to that week.
Yes.
All right. And once you, well, let me ask you this. If when you had asked Wallace Bradsher, is she working these hours, and he'd said no, what would you have done?
I wouldn't have released it.
Okay. Well, why did you ask Wallace Bradsher if she was working those hours?
Because he had told me that he was going to assume responsibility for her in August of 2015.
After you released the hours on Beacon, what'd you do next?
I told him that I had released it. At some point, Tyler Henderson came in, and there was a conversation about talking to Craig Blitzer on the telephone, and I left and went back to the volleyball game.
All right. And from then on, did you have any conversation with Wallace Bradsher about approval of time or anything having to do with Cindy Blitzer that you remember?
I received an email from someone at AOC that asked if Cindy
Okay,
had
well, I'm not asking you if you had a conversation with somebody at AOC. I'm asking if you had a conversation with Wallace
I did.
Bradsher.
In response to an inquiry from AOC, I indicated to Mr. Bradsher that I had received an inquiry from AOC and I was not taking any action on it until the matter was resolved.
Okay. And did you ever release any more time for Cindy Blitzer?
No,
At some point, did you meet with the SBI?
I did.
And would that have been around September the 9th of 2016?
That sounds appropriate.
And was that with Agent Whitley?
It was.
When you met with Agent Whitley, did you provide Agent Whitley with information about this investigation?
Yes.
Tell him basically what you told this jury today?
Yes.
Did you provide him with any tasks or things that you had asked Cindy Blitzer to handle during your course of supervision?
I mentioned to him that there were other things that I had asked her to do, but I couldn't recall when they happened. And I indicated to him that I would go and try to anchor those in terms of time of when I received emails about cases and things, and I would provide those to him after the lunch recess. I think he had another interview that day.
Okay. And did you provide those things to Agent Whitley?
I did.
Did you ever have a conversation with Wallace Bradsher about Cindy Blitzer in nursing school?
It may have been mentioned in passing very, very early on that she had been in nursing school. And when I say early on, I'm talking January, February of 2015, that she had been in nursing school.
Okay. You didn't talk to him after that about that you remember?
There may have been one mention that he was trying to assist her to finish her coursework by talking to the PCC, Piedmont Community College Director of Nursing. But I don't remember. It was just, there again, was just in passing.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions at this time.
Cross-examination, Mr. Bradsher.
Yes, Your Honor, thanks. Good morning.
Good morning.
The election that you were just talking to the jury about, you described it for the prosecutor as contentious. Can you tell the jury what was going on during that time during the election?
I was running against an incumbent district court judge. That district court judge had a significant base of support with the bar in Caswell County and also in Person County to an extent. The incumbent was from Caswell County, and Caswell was not as excited about a lawyer from Person County running for a seat held by a Caswell County judge.
And beginning in January of 2015, you would have started as the Caswell chief, is that right?
Yes.
But you actually grew up in Rockingham County, is that right?
Yes.
Your whole life?
Yes.
Isn't it true your father was a lawyer?
Yes.
And you're only child of a lawyer, so you grew up around law?
Yes.
And your grandfather was a magistrate? Is that
Yes.
right? And so you married the daughter of a lawyer
That's correct.
and moved to Person County from Rockingham, is that right?
Yes, in 2003.
So you would have started private practice about when?
1996, September of 1996.
And then stayed as a general practitioner and criminal defense lawyer until you came to the DA's office in 2011, is that right?
That's correct.
So for your whole life, from the time you were a child, you were around law, weren't you?
Yes.
Okay. And then when you started as prosecutor with my office in 2011, you were named chief of Person County, is that right?
Yes.
Just to ask you briefly, during those 4 years, you oversaw operations for everything that went on in Person County, is that correct?
Concurrently oversaw, yes.
Okay. I was involved as well.
You were involved, as was Ms. McAdams.
In fact, you told the jury that you asked me to take the Shockley case. Would you agree that Ms. McAdams, the senior ADA, and I tried most of the cases? Is that
Yes.
right? From the murder cases to the most serious cases?
Yes.
And then as person chief, you would also do jury trials as well?
Yes, as I was assigned.
And during the first 4 years, Luann Martin was Caswell chief, is that right?
That's correct.
And she would also do some jury trials as well?
She did.
Okay. Now, as we transitioned into the second term, would you agree the first 4 years was a busy, hardworking time?
Overruled, but I'll allow that limited inquiry. And
Yes, it was very busy.
All right. And then, starting the second term, you recall that we actually had a breakfast on the first day of the new year with a new plan, new lineup on job assignments, the way to tackle the next term.
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, there had been no notification from AOC that there was any problem with Pam working there. Is that right?
I don't believe that there was.
Okay. I wanted to follow up. The prosecutor asked you earlier about when did you first become aware of an issue with Pam, and you said right at the beginning. Do you recall Luann Martin researching that issue and contacting?
I remember I never talked to Luann about it. I remember having a conversation with you that it had been researched and that AOC deemed it was okay.
Okay. And as Person County Chief during those 4 years, you saw Pam in courtroom openly working with judges and everybody else, is that right?
Yes.
With the full knowledge that she was my wife.
Yes.
Then do you recall the first or second week in January, this issue coming up where AOC had called and said, there's this State Ethics Act?
I recalled that you said that there was an issue with it.
Okay. Do you recall when you would have been first talked to by me with regards to the transfer of Pam to Rockingham County?
I don't recall the specific date. To the best of my recollection, it would have been towards the end of January.
So the jury can fully understand the context. During the first 4 years, the only beacon that you approved was Gail Pete, is that right?
I may have briefly reviewed and released Beacon for David Ramsey, the investigator, but then I think Ms. Peed took that over. It was only a brief period of time that took place.
Okay. And Gail Pete, as the AA, would approve Beacon for everybody else?
Yes.
All right. And then after the switch, when you became Caswell Chief, when do you say that you got the duty of approving Cindy Blitzer's Beacon?
It would have been after she became employed with us and it was, to the best of my remembrance, it was probably a week or 2 or 3 lag time before I picked up that responsibility.
Okay. Did you coordinate with Ms. Pete on that?
I don't remember having a conversation with her about it.
All right. So as you started out, because we've got a couple of dates to talk about, August 2015 and then March of 2016, but from the beginning, was it your responsibility to approve Beacon for Cindy Blitzer?
From the time it was assigned to me, yes, it was my responsibility.
Now, you had never worked in a DA's office before, is that right?
Not prior to 2011.
And prior to being Person County Chief, you weren't familiar with Beacon, were you?
No.
All right. Well, we are a multi-county district, is that right?
Yes.
And Ms. Pede would approve folks that worked in Caswell County, is that
Yes.
right? When you did the AOC orientation and training, was it ever represented to you that approval of Beacon was more than an administrative function?
Objection.
Sustained as to just the form of the question.
What was your understanding based on your review of AOC's supervision that the responsibility that came with approving somebody's Beacon?
I don't think I ever received any AOC training about Beacon. I just was aware of it. I think Ms. Pede talked to me about it, about the process of going through that.
All right. You were familiar with people submitting their hours through Beacon, right?
Yes, and when I say I talked to Ms. Pede, that would have been in January of 2011.
Okay.
That I had that conversation because I was dealing with Ms. Pede's hours in Beacon.
All right. And would you, when you approved Beacon for anyone during the time you're at the DA's office, trust what they put in Beacon that they had worked?
If it, I would review it and look at it, and if it made sense, I would.
Okay. Ms. Pede, would she be in a position to see Debbie Hallbrook in Caswell or other staff people in Caswell on a daily basis?
Objection.
Overruled if he knows.
Yes and no. She would not see their day-to-day operations, but if she made a phone call and nobody answered the telephone, obviously somebody was not there.
Okay. And the LP approved everybody else, is that right?
Yes, to the best of my knowledge.
When you first met with Agent Whitley, you told him that Cindy Blitzer was working as a liaison with Person in Caswell,
Yes.
and that she was handling conflict cases, is
Yes.
that right? Do you recall talking to Cindy Blitzer about the other things she was doing at the Rockingham office?
No.
Give the jury an idea of the cases you were doing for Rockingham during this time period of 2015.
There were a number of cases that Mr. Blitzer, the new incoming DA, had participated in either in a consultation or had represented co-defendants with some other additional people. There were a few cases that were dismissed with leave because an individual had failed to appear at a court session and Mr. Blitzer was still listed as the attorney of record. There was a DWI case that I believe involved someone in the court system or someone in the DA staff that they were somehow conflicted out. There was a case that was a drug case that involved a member of the someone that in the DA's office knew very well, and they didn't feel comfortable about prosecuting that. So there was probably less than 20 conflict cases.
All right, including sexual assault, felony drug cases, things like that?
There was a felony sexual assault. There was a felony drug. There was a number of felony drug cases, and a felonious assault, DWI, and some other matters.
And you did produce emails to the SBI that when you had coordination of handling these cases, that you would ask Cindy Blitzer to do things and coordinate for you, didn't you?
I asked Cindy to work on Shockley and nothing else really. I think she assisted me in getting a DWI continued to a date that was suitable for everyone. And she may have had some conversation with me about a sexual assault case, but outside of those 3 instances, I don't recall anything else that I gave her to do.
All right. Did you see her in the Rockingham County office?
No,
Did you ever go over there to do court?
I did.
All right. And did you see her office?
Yes.
Okay. But you didn't see her in it?
No.
Would this be the time period up to August 2015?
Yes, that would have been, to the best of my memory, May or June of 2016.
Okay.
Or 2015.
When would you say the last time you saw her in terms of physically working?
That I physically saw her probably sometime in early March
Of what?
2015.
2015?
Yes.
Okay. And then you and I had a conversation in August of 2015.
Yes.
Do you recall at that time the issue of Tyler Henderson and the development of digital discovery?
I remember that was raised at some point in time. I don't remember that it was in that conversation, but it was raised at some point in time.
All right. In terms of just facts, during the first 4 years, was Person County, which you oversaw all operations, a paper-based stamped
Yes.
department? And since you were elected judge in November of 2016, were you able to see the development of the digital system within Person County over 2015 into 2016?
I observed that happening, yes.
Okay. To include paperless files?
Yes.
All right. And as you were Caswell chief, did you see the development of, well, let me put it this way, efforts made to get Caswell County Sheriff's Department to go onto that system?
You specifically asked me in January of 2015 to try to implement that with the Caswell County Sheriff's Office.
All right. And from January until you left as Caswell chief, were you able to get cooperation to do that?
It didn't happen.
Okay. Now, while you were there, you supervised Debbie Hallbrook, is that right?
Concurrently, yes.
Concurrently with me?
Concurrently with you, we had a pattern in our office of concurrent management. If Mr. Williford had asked Ms. Hallbrook to go do something, he had the authority to do that. If Ms. McAdams came in and needed something, her to do something, so yes, everybody minded the store over there.
Okay. So in August 2015, did we have this discussion in Caswell?
No, it was in person.
Okay. And that's when you came to me and said that you wanted me to take the Shockley file and be responsible for trying it. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And I told you that I would.
Yes.
Okay. Did you continue to approve Beacon after August 2015?
I did.
Okay. Do you recall us talking after August 2015?
We did talk about a number of things in passing.
Bad question. Let me try again.
Right.
Did we talk about Cindy Blitzer's approval in Beacon after August 2015 that you recall?
No, the only time I would ask about the update of the Shockley case from time to time, I would occasionally get a phone call from one of the attorneys, Wayne Hollowell or Dick Panish. They would call me because they had been dealing with me and wanted to get in touch with you about the case, and then I would call or talk to you in the hallway and say, hey, what's going on? They're calling me. You need to call them back, that kind of thing.
All right. You've seen me develop and try cases for many years, is that right?
That's correct.
So when it came time to get ready to either plead or try, Do you recall me going to Rockingham to get the file?
I remember you being in the Caswell office indicating that you were going to go get the file.
Okay. In terms of your office as of March of 2016, where would you be going every day?
Caswell?
Okay. So you would still have an office in Castle?
Yes.
You and I would see each other every day, is that right? Well,
Almost every day.
do you recall seeing the Shockley file come to Castle?
I believe that it did.
All right. Do you recall seeing Tyler Henderson working on that?
I believe I did. My memory is that it was in our office and got flooded by one of the temporary air conditioners during the summertime, and it required a lot of dealing with, yes.
That was my next question. Do you remember the courthouse renovations for Caswell County, first floor?
Yes.
Could you describe how the lower floor was gutted for the jury in the summer of 2016?
It was a very challenging. We had, at one point in time, had to suspend a trial week because of the heat. It wasn't hospitable for jurors, and there was a lot of disruption of the court system because there was no ceiling in the courtroom. It was just a bare metal roof with no acoustic tiles.
Do you recall the event in the summer of 2016 where the Shockley file was damaged and contact was made with Cindy Blitzer to get replacement files?
I know that the file was on the floor in large banker's boxes and got wet. I remember a very voluminous file being damaged. To the best of my recollection, it was the Shockley file. I don't know whether Cindy was ever called.
Okay. In the summer of 2016?
That's correct.
All right. So in terms of you going into Beacon and approving it, would you do that monthly from August of 2015 until March of 2016, or was it sporadically?
It was sporadic.
Do you recall us ever talking about the approval of Beacon during that time?
No.
You assumed that I was taking care of that, isn't that right?
After March of 2016, yes.
After March of 2016, okay. Well, the prosecutor asked you about two things. I just want to clear it up for the jury. After March of 2016, you felt as if you had no responsibility for Beacon, is that right?
That's correct.
Prior to March of 2016, going back to August of 2015, you were still doing Beacon, but you thought that I was making sure she was working. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Okay. So can you tell the jury about that conversation in March of 2016? Do you recall whether or not I had gone to get the Shockley file yet?
I don't, Mr. Bradsher.
Okay. All right, and then you recall seeing the Shockley file there, and you were rotating courts doing other duties, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then we're now to August.
Yes.
Do you recall you and I speaking about the Cindy Blitzer matter anytime before this August 15th after 5 o'clock time?
I don't think we spoke about Cindy from March of 2016 to August of 2016.
All right. And since I left the DA's office May 19th, 2016, you and I have not discussed this matter, is that correct?
No.
Okay. So let's talk about that night. Do you remember when you talked with the SBI that you recalled that I reached out to you and asked you that about Cindy Blitzer, there was an issue with her hours?
Yes.
Okay. And then, isn't it true that we spoke and you told the SBI that you told me I thought you were taking care of that?
Yes.
All right. And then, isn't it true that you also told the SBI that, is it the same deal? Is she still working?
I told Agent Whitley that I had been, shared employee program had been explained to me by you, a liaison between Caswell, Person, and Rockingham, and it had been described to me by you, and I talked about that at some length.
Okay.
But when I referred to the, was it the same deal, I meant, is she still cooperating with this program that you had described to me?
Okay.
And by she, I mean Cindy Blitzer.
All right. And then you also indicated the SBI agent that you called Gail. Is that
Yes.
right? To see if she was approving the hours.
Yes.
Okay.
Or see if someone else was.
Okay. Do you remember why, if you remember, why you would call Gail to ask her if she was approving the hours?
We had the conversation, and I made the comment, I said, well, who is in charge of releasing Cindy's hours to AOC? At that point, I thought it was some administrative gaffe that had happened. When you indicated to me that it was my responsibility, then I was certain no one had probably been doing it, but I wanted to make sure by verifying that with Gail.
Right. That's what I wanted to clear up. When the prosecutor was asking you the question and the response was, you're going to go do it. But I think you've explained the context. You asked, who's supposed to be doing it? And I said, you are, right?
That was exactly what you said. You
Okay.
are.
And you were like, no, I thought I was relieved of that responsibility, right?
Yes.
And then you went and called Ms. Peed
Yes.
and checked with her to see if she had been doing it. Is that
Yes.
right? Then you recall telling the SBI that you thought that you had messed up. Is that right?
I thought that the SBI inquiry was an administrative function because Cindy's time had not been released for a vast period of time.
And then you wanted to try to resolve that because you thought she wasn't getting paid. Is that right?
There had been someone had made a comment in passing that if you didn't release Beacon, someone might not get paid.
Okay.
I don't know where along the way in 6 years somebody said that, but
And I hope I'm permitted to ask this question. I'll ask it slowly in case there's an objection. Isn't it true that over the 6 years that you worked in the district attorney's office, you always worked hard to resolve any problem that came up?
yes,
You are the son of a lawyer, the grandson of a magistrate, a sworn ADA, and an attorney, and you're a person of faith, aren't you?
yes,
So your duty to try and do the right thing at that moment was absolute, wasn't it?
I don't know about absolute. I thought there was an administrative problem.
Okay. And you tried to resolve it, is that right?
I asked if you wanted me to approve it.
Okay. Everything that you did with regards to Cindy Blitzer was under my supervision and/or direction. Isn't that right?
Yes,
Okay. So the responsibility ultimately is with me, isn't it?
I believe so.
And after we had that conversation, you approved the Beacon and then went on. Is that right?
Yes.
When you approved it, did you know that it went through July 14th or August 14th?
I don't recall what date it went through. I know it included the holiday of July 4th because I looked to make sure that that was a designated holiday date.
All right. At that moment in time, August of 2016, did you know that even if an employee doesn't put in their Beacon hours, they still get a paycheck?
Objection.
Cross your arm.
Overrule.
Judge, may we approach on this issue?
Yes.
Stultz, in response to one of the questions, in fact, the statement to the SBI was you were afraid that she wasn't getting paid. Is that right?
No, I was concerned that that would be a problem, and yet I asked that night, I said, has she been paid? And I don't remember what the response was.
Okay. All right. Did you know as of August of 2016 the impact of your approval on Beacon, if any?
I found out later that it was when I spoke with Agent Whitley, I was made aware that there was a criminal investigation, not an administrative matter. And Agent Whitley asked me questions about things that led me to believe that there were a lot of other issues that I was not aware of in August when I approved the Beacon time.
All right. And August 15th was the day that we talked. Is that right?
To the best of my recollection, I think that's the day that the Beacon was released.
And you met with the SBI on what day?
I think it was September the 9th.
All right. And you were truthful to the SBI to the best of your ability, weren't you?
Yes.
Okay. And cooperated fully?
Yes.
All right. With regards to any Cindy Blitzer Beacon hours, for whatever you approved on August 15th, did you have any more involvement with Cindy Blitzer?
No.
All right. Did you have involvement during this time period, and I will couch it in 2016, with Debbie Holbrook?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Bradsher, I need to break.
Yes, sir.
This time, and can pick up right there after the lunch recess. So ladies and gentlemen, we're breaking now until 2 o'clock. Please return to the jury deliberation room at 2 o'clock. Please recall the instructions. Don't talk about the case among yourselves or with anyone else. Don't form or express opinions about the outcome. No media or independent investigation into these matters, and no conversations with parties, witnesses, or lawyers. We'll see you back at 2 o'clock. Leave all your materials in your chair. Everyone else, please remain seated.